What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York calling from Zoom again, and this time we are here with Josh of the almighty Sylosis. Thank you so much for being here, man. It is great to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, anytime, man. It's so awesome to have you here. A Sign of Things to Come is an absolutely fantastic album, the perfect continuation of the cycle of suffering. For people who haven't heard the album yet, though, do you feel that the first singles that we heard, such as the title track, Poison for the Lost, and Deadwood, is maybe a good representation of this whole album, or is that just one little sign of things to come, no pun intended?
I think it's a pretty good representation. I think those first two singles were really focused on like the heavy side of things, which we definitely wanted to inject a lot more of that like intensity into this record. But it is still quite diverse. I think there's like some darker atmospheric moments and some melody here and there. But on the whole, we really wanted it to be like a most like heavy and intense record and kind of inject some energy into the band that I'm super proud of everything we've done, but I felt as I got better as a guitarist and as a songwriter, got more focused on like the finesse of things as opposed to when we started when we were kids, just wanted to be like the heaviest band ever. And it's funny because there's this period of time in the band's career when the first like 4 or 5 years are completely undocumented. Like you can't find anything about the band from that period, and we were a lot more focused on like just being the noisiest, heaviest band. And like this record was actually closer to where we were when we were kids when we first started. And so like some people are like, oh, is this new for the band? It's like, no, this is like the roots of the band in many ways. But it's still like obviously a modern record. I wouldn't say it's completely like a throwback, but
I can't tell you how many people I've shown Sylosis to or introduced them to you, and they just immediately assumed, oh, are they from Gothenburg, Sweden? Are they? Do they know At the Gates and The Haunted and In Flames? And then I'm like, no, they're from the UK. The UK, they don't sound like Bullet for My Valentine. So, so,
yeah.
uh, um, was the intention to sort of like pick up where you left off after the cycle of suffering in a way, or was this meant to, as you sort of mentioned, it's kind of going back to the early days of Sylosis, so you're not really considering this a continuation or a sequel to that?
I think it kind of continues on like uh, in in the sense that Cycle of Suffering, the songs were a bit more focused. There wasn't quite as many like more lengthy progressive songs like we had done previously. And as much as I love the technical stuff and we'll always have that, the longer songs I don't feel I have, or many people this day and age have like the attention span for. So I feel like we've continued on in that it's quite focused, and we tried to make the record like just 10 songs, which is unusual for us, like just one single disc of vinyl, side A, side B, like like Master of Puppets and that kind of thing. Just try and do like a classic record that's just like 10 songs, try and leave you wanting more. And in the past we've always done long long records. So
Yeah.
yeah, there's many differences for this one, and it in many ways it feels like another debut album, like a rebirth of the band, like a bit of a new injection of life into the band. But yeah, I think it still kind of continues on sound wise from Cycle of Suffering, and my vocals in particular, I really felt like I pushed on Cycle of Suffering, and they've continued to get better again
Oh,
on the new one.
absolutely. Absolutely. To this day, I think the best Sylosis song, in my opinion, is Nvidia off of the last album. Just the way that you're able to sustain those notes and then go right into Idle Hands after that was just truly goosebump inducing. And again, being the soundtrack to lockdown of 2020, tired of being alone and the fingers you work to the bone, I mean, you definitely predicted a lot of the agony and despair that was felt through that pandemic. So.
Oh, thank you, man. Yeah, that means a lot.
As a fan of Sylosis, if you played me 30 seconds of a song, I could tell that that would be off of Conclusion of an Age, or that will be off of Monolith or Dormant Heart, etc. When you go into the making of a new album, do you go into it with a preconceived vision in a way, or is your songwriting very improvised and experimental?
Yeah, generally it's quite improvised and experimental. I think like we're always going to have like one foot in the sound that we've established over like Edge of the Earth, that era, but the other foot is kind of free to like go elsewhere. But we're always going to be like a riff based band that plays like heavy fast music. But yeah, every now and then it's cool to just try um something a bit different. So I think there's a bit more of like an anthemic feel to the songs in the new record, which was a deliberate focus to try and create like a classic record that feels like big, like, and confident, you know. And a bunch of the records that I grew up listening to were like super heavy, but still like anthemic. It doesn't necessarily mean like radio rock, like Great Southern Trendkill by Pantera, like still full of hooks, but it's the most pissed off heavy record. Same with like Iowa by Slipknot, like super heavy, but it's still like People Equal Shit still feels like anthemic, even though it's not like a single by any means.
Yeah.
But we hadn't had a lot of that kind of anthemic feel to our music, and we wanted to kind of try and write like a classic record. Like, this is going to be an album that like solidifies us and like has some confidence behind it.
When it comes to your lyrics, you know, with lyrics like "Forever Be Turmoiled," "Buried Beneath the Broken Soil" off of Mercy, or like a track like "Shield," "I swear I tried, but the guilt is eating me alive." Do you think of these lyrics before you come up with music, and that maybe helps guide the musical direction, or have you always needed the music to come up with the lyrics?
It's usually music first in most cases, and there's a few exceptions where I'll have some lyrics that I write just, you know, on their own, just as they come to me. But yeah, usually it's like the music, and I guess I'm just like drawn to like more melancholic kind of stuff and imagery, and that just is what's natural to me. So there's always that kind of undertone to the lyrics, I think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the melancholy undertone is present throughout your lyrics, but like I still get different vibes. Like a song like "A Dying Vine," I feel like has a very like that's very suspenseful. I feel, whereas "Mercy," I feel like is very submersed into a realm of depression, and then like I feel like "Idle Hands" is very anger driven. So, are your lyrics always coming from within in a very personal spot and your experiences with grief and despair, or is it coming from like external sources?
A lot of the lyrics, typically, more so in the past, have been like kind of internal stuff and talking about, you know, like depression or Edge of the Earth in particular. I had like years of like really bad insomnia, which would also lead to just feeling like depressed and stuff. But the yeah, I guess I've always kind of just had that kind of like undertone of melancholy, and I've never really known like why it's there like in me, because I feel like I had quite a like fortunate upbringing and stuff, and that kind of thing. But it's always like kind of present when I write music. But the new record, there's probably a bit more pointing the finger elsewhere. There's a bit less of like I hate myself, a bit more of yeah, looking at the world. I mean, the lyrics for this one, most of them were written, you know, during the pandemic, during lockdown, and when there's all kinds of things going on socially, politically in the world that, yeah, like there was just a lot of shifts happening in that time. So that kind of came out, and like a Sign of Things to Come, the title track, is kind of more about that kind of anxiety around like what the future holds and certain things that are happening over the past few years that you'd be like, well, this is new. Like, is this where like society's heading? Like some of the like the darker side of things, and or even stuff like, you know, like climate change. Like, is this thing like getting out of control? That kind of stuff, and the fears of, you know, what the future looks like, I guess.
When you have to, or not have to, but when depression or darkness or grief is the sort of main subject matter for what you do, because even like, you know, playing with Architects, you know, playing on the death is not defeat cycle and all that, like, you know, that's also very melancholy as well. Does that maybe make the songwriting process just as deteriorating in a way, or traumatic even, as it can be cathartic? Is there like an art to controlling your demons to make it your art so you don't let it consume you?
I don't know. It's so different. Like, songs can come from different places and still have a similar like feel or outcome. And for the most part, like, I'm a happy, content person. Like, I'm not like walking around miserable or depressed all the time. And I'm like really grateful for, you know, like the life I have and my wife and everything and my kids. But yeah, sometimes it's just like that stuff just bubbles out when I'm writing music, and maybe that's why I don't. It doesn't always completely consume me because I've got like an outlet for it, maybe. Completely off on a completely weird tangent, but my wife's a psychologist, and she's talked about like the real science behind like epigenetics, where you can pass trauma down like genetically, not even through behavior, but like literally in the DNA.
Yeah,
it is like scientifically proven now. And I always feel like a sort of a weird connection to like my grandfather, who went through a lot during the war and like came back with a lot of anxiety and stuff. And like sometimes I've kind of like wondered where like all this stuff comes from with me, because like I said, I feel like I had a good upbringing. And then the more I hear about like my mom talking about him as a kid, I'm like, oh, that's no. Yeah, so I'm just like entertaining these ideas as they come into my head. But yeah, so I don't really know that. But in terms of, you know, writing songs and stuff being cathartic, like it definitely is good to have that release and, you know, be able to write music to sort of release these things, especially like anger and stuff like that. And there's a lot of more emotionally driven, be it anger or whatever else, on the new record than in the past.
It was so good to hear you say that, because I'm a third generation Holocaust survivor. My grandfather was in the camps during the war, and that has been proven. Like psychology speaking, like that trauma and, you know, that anxiety that he faced was passed down to my mom, and it was, you know, passed down to me. And I had a very colorful upbringing, and, you know, no complaints. You know, wouldn't change my life for anything, but, you know, there is that underlying essence of anxiety and depression. And, you know, you see that a lot with Native Americans, the indigenous people, how, you know, their history of oppression. You know, you look at any group who is victimized by oppression, that trauma is passed down. It's not like just because the experiences are different doesn't mean that the results of those experiences aren't passed down.
Yeah, for sure.
When it comes to your guitar playing as well, because you have a very eclectic voice, the way that we hear the clean vocals in a track like Mercy or After Lifeless Years, does the instrumentation maybe adjust to fit the vocal style as well?
On the new record, I definitely was a lot more mindful of my voice and like really pushing it. And we changed tunings on the new record, so we're down in the C sharp standard now. Which accommodates my voice a bit more, because I'm a baritone. I've got quite a low voice, and I'm able to hit higher notes, like the highest notes in my range, at the lower the guitar tuning. So I'm singing higher than ever in an area that I think sounds better, but because the guitars have gone lower, it allows the vocal to, like, you know, be the focus. And spent a lot of time on the new record writing a song, singing the chorus, and being like, let's try it up like 2 notes or down 2 notes. Not necessarily the tuning, but literally adjusting the riff or where I'm playing it on the fretboard, to really kind of get the best out of the vocals. And that's never been done in the past. Like in the past, it's like, this is the riff, I'm gonna sing over it, and if I can't hit that note, then I'll have to hit that note or whatever else. And this time around, it's all about making the vocals like the forefront of what I do. And not to take away from the guitar playing, I don't think, but it's time the vocals really had their space.
Well, you led me perfectly into the next question, because your guitar riffs definitely resonate, but also your vocals and your lyrics do. I feel like they both equally invoke enough emotion. Being that you sing and play, do you express the same feeling through both instruments that you use, or is there maybe a side of yourself that you could only express on guitar, or a side of yourself that you could only express vocally, and vice versa?
I definitely feel like my vocals are a bit more expressive now, and I kind of allow myself to be more honest or vulnerable with the vocal performances than in the past. But there's something about the feel of guitar solos as well, that the spontaneity of it, because with vocals you've got to it's rare that when I'm recording vocals, if I don't have lyrics, I will just like record myself just saying gibberish over the track just to get a feel for maybe patterns or like melodies if I don't have any lyrics. But it's very rare that I'll have anything recorded from doing that. Whereas with guitar, when I'm playing a solo, like I can just press record and just improvise, and whatever comes out the first time might end up on the record, which you can't do with vocals. Like you have to write lyrics, and you might want to get a better performance. But with guitar playing, it can be so spontaneous, that reaction and the expressiveness, that there's something about playing guitar, specifically talking about guitar solos, that's just a bit different. Yeah.
Well, because I was also wondering if maybe with playing these riffs and these solos and whatnot, like for instance, I feel like a Dying Vine is a track where like the instrumentation changes so drastically in a way, how you have like a very technical part that you go into, and then it outros out with a very atmospheric part. I also think Leeches off of Dormant Heart is a good example of that too. So like, does the music like naturally change over time? Do you just find yourself subconsciously going into those changes, or are you like very much aware, being like, it's heavy here, we need to make it softer here?
It can really vary. Funnily enough, I don't know if this is the case with a Dying Vine, but songs like that in the past, usually I spend a lot of time like sat at like a piano or trying to write melodic stuff that like genuinely like evokes some sort of emotion from me, and like that's usually like the big focus of our music is that. And sometimes I'll write like the big epic melodic section first, figure out what key it's in, what tempo, and write the song backwards from there. Like, how do we get to here? But this is going to be the climax of the song. So it's not necessarily the case for Dying Vine or Leech. I can't remember the process of writing those songs necessarily. But well, actually, yeah, I remember I've got a voice note of me playing the chorus to Leech on an acoustic guitar. That was the first thing I wrote. So yeah, sometimes, a lot of times with that sort of stuff, I'll work backwards and start with the big melodic climax, and then what can I wrap around it, and what, because I always want like loads of heavy, fast riffs and energy and stuff, but I also want to get to this melodic bit. So it's like, how do I work backwards to get that? So yeah, it can depend. It can vary from every song to song, but a lot of times, weirdly enough, I write the big melodic stuff first.
Being how different of like a mindset on a technical level or on an emotional level, what is playing Sylosis versus your time with Architects? Because I feel like even though Architects is, and I hate the genre labeling, but like a metalcore band and has that metalcore sound to it, they both equally have, both Sylosis and Architects have equally anthemic choruses. There are epic sounds to it. The riffs that are brought into it are very, very intriguing. So like, I was just wondering, is there at all a similar method behind the madness, or was it a completely different energy that you're channeling into the
two? In terms of like the writing approaches, there's no like set way that I write for Sylosis, and it's sort of the same for Architects. So there was, in terms of writing a song, I might come up with a riff first, or I might come up with like the middle eight section first and work backwards from there. And in terms of, yeah, like the melodic input, or the emotional input, I guess, I obviously try and inject some feel and some emotion into what I write, but specifically like the era that I joined Architects in, like, it really comes out when you write the lyrics, and obviously Dan was writing the lyrics for that stuff at that time. And like, obviously that was, yeah, a very emotional period, like, in playing some of those songs, especially some of the songs that Tom wrote on the last record. So yeah, that was heavy.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you work on a song for a long period of time, because it seems like you have a very you definitely know what you're doing and the calculating aspect. But emotion and inspiration, it can sometimes strike and be like lightning.
Yeah.
It goes. So when you work on something for a long period of time, do you find it a little bit more difficult to sort of maintain that emotion that initially sparked the idea?
No, I don't think so, but it can be hard sometimes to finish a song. So like sometimes, like you say, you'll have a song and it just comes together. Like you've got the whole song done in like an hour, and that can just happen sometimes. And usually they can be like the best or most exciting songs to come out. Sometimes I'll have like 90% of the song for 2 years, but I can't finish it, or I like all the parts, but it's 8 minutes, and that's just too long, even by our old standards. That kind of thing. But like, so sometimes it would be really tricky to finish a song. But in terms of, um, I think if like you capture like the energy and the emotion of like that initial idea, and you retain that in the music, I don't think it can like stagnate over time. But I've definitely found instances where it's just really hard to finish a song. Like you just need that last 10%, or you just need to know which riff to sacrifice for the greater good. But for me, I always refer to writing songs as like spinning plates. I usually have like 20 song projects for either band on the go at any time, and one might just have two riffs. One might be 99% done, but it might be. I mean, if I hit a brick wall with one of them, I just move on to something else. So I've been asked a lot about like what I do if I get writer's block, and I don't really get it because I just keep switching to something else. I don't just write one song and then that's my whole focus. Or like I'll just move to something else, like production, and mess around with mixing. But yeah.
This is sort of like a debate I like to have. Is inspiration really something that can be sought out? Can you go looking for it? I mean, sure, there's literature and visual art and film and all that stuff, but the creative energy, does that just have to strike you in a way? You can't really go looking for that.
Uh, I think it's best when like it just like hits you and you just write a song and you feel like you literally like plucked it out of the air. And usually those songs are like there's something about them that like is you know exciting. But I my whole life has been writing music. Like every day is like a 9 to 5 job. Like I just do it like all the time. Not all the time, but that's where I spend most of my time, in front of the computer writing music. And yeah, like sometimes some of the best songs would be ones that I'm just going to write a song, and this is what I'm going to try and do, and I'm really trying. And sometimes that works, and sometimes I'll pick up a guitar just to play it, and the first thing I play is like the riff without even thinking about it, and it just like it's almost like I didn't write it. So I definitely think that when that happens, there's something like special going on there. But I think you can seek it out as well. But I think you need a lot of experience in what you're doing to be able to like put those pieces together, maybe. A lot of practice.
Silly question that I've been asking every guitarist now. Do you think we will ever, because when I ask people, and whether it's rock and roll bands, doom, black, death, metalcore, 9 times out of 10 when I ask how a song starts, it starts off with a riff. Do you think we'll ever run out of riffs one day?
It's a good question. I mean, you could probably argue that we already have, and like you've got to think of the amount of bands that, because I know like awesome bands that were local bands that were amazing, but they never got signed. They never like made it anywhere, and it's a shame because they wrote really good music. So you've got to think of the amount of bands who have written amazing songs or amazing riffs that no one really heard. So it's hard. It's definitely hard to try to come up with a riff that like no one's heard anything like it before. But with enough time, enough people will forget the older ones, or will be new generations, and you can just either rehash the riffs or just rewrite them without even knowing you're doing it, and I think it's all fine.
You definitely have a plethora of unforgettable riffs. I think like the intro to Built a Tomb is a fantastic unforgettable riff. The apex of Disdain off the last album I thought was an unforgettable riff. You got you got riffs of plenty. So
Thank you. That's my life's work, is to supply the world with riffs. So I feel like I've got a lot under my belt at this point in
oh,
time.
and we only want more. So I want you to keep.
Oh,
You need to keep making riffs for the rest of my life. That's the only request I have.
I'll try.
And I have a few more questions for you. This is kind of like going deep into the catalog, because I've always said that art is life, and when you bring something into the world, it can grow and it can develop and even die sometimes. Do you want every album to almost be like a snapshot of who you are at that particular time? You want Edge of the Earth to only be representative of who you are in 2011, Monolith in 2012, etc.? Or do you think that maybe the work could evolve with you over time, and that as you play it more and people interpret it more meaning and context is added to it?
It's not something I've ever really thought about in that way. I think I don't necessarily like want the albums to be like a snapshot in time, or at least that's not the intention. I don't mind either way if they end up being like that. Some stuff will be quite specific. Like Edge of the Earth was quite a specific period of my life where like I had just really bad insomnia, and I was writing a lot of this music sort of like at 4 a.m. just kind of like, I don't know, you kind of feel like you're on drugs or something when you're in that sort of like sleep deprived state, but you're writing music. And there's something about like the witching hour. I don't know if that's just like a load of garbage, but like around 3 a.m. to 4 a.m. when like creativity is like at an all-time high or something. But yeah, like that record was written in that period of time that I never want to have like those feelings again, or like the insomnia and all that anxiety. But yeah, I definitely don't feel like I'm really that different to who I was back then. I definitely have learned, you know, more as a musician, and I'm a better collaborator these days and everything.
Mm-hmm.
But I still feel like I'm that same person that wrote those records.
Yeah. When you play live, like because you know when you're bringing it to a venue and you know you go all around the set list. So if you play like a Monolith song, does it almost kind of make you feel like you're playing in 2012, or if you're playing a Dormant Heart song, you're back in 2015, or yeah.
It can do. I think only really though because we had that like hiatus before Cycle of Suffering where we didn't play for a while, and because of COVID and working on the new record, we haven't done as many shows as we'd have liked over the last few years. So it's hard to know, because I do have a bit of that feeling of nostalgia, but I think maybe if the band had just kept touring and rolling through that whole period, that maybe it wouldn't necessarily feel like that. But we had a bit of a gap in our career in that period, so it's hard to know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was wondering too, if because you mentioned that Edge of the Earth was written in such like a, you know, not a particularly good place, is that why you immediately put out Monolith a year later? Was it just like to kind of like bury that in the past?
No, not really. Like I loved Edge of the Earth. Weirdly, I don't know, this has only just popped into my head. I remember telling my friend Craig Reynolds, who does the Downbeat podcast, he's the drummer in Straight from the Path. I remember telling him after we'd done Edge of the Earth, or we're about to finish it, I remember saying to him, I really hope I don't die before we finish this record, because I feel like it's like, I'm so proud of it. I want it to I want to make sure it gets released. I think I was really drunk when I said that. But, no, I don't feel anything like that towards Edge of the Earth. I still really like it. I don't feel like, I don't listen to it and feel like, oh, depressed or tired or anything. And I think in terms of the release, I think it sort of like came out at the start of 2011, and it was done way before that, and Monolith was like the end of 2012. So
okay.
It's close enough to a 2-year thing maybe, but it's just like the odd month here and there maybe. But
yeah.
I mean, I'd like to keep getting albums out a lot quicker these days than we have done, given the whole hiatus, and even like the 3-year gap between Cycle of Suffering to the Sign of Things to Come, I want to try and stick to more like a 2 year plan if we can.
Well, I mean, I didn't think Dormant. I thought Dormant Heart was untouchable when I first heard that. I thought that was the best album in the genre since Slaughter of the Soul, and
Wow.
and then you put out the Cycle of Suffering, and you outdid that. So maybe taking the gap is working in your favor. Just saying.
Maybe.
Yeah. And the final question I wanted to ask you is because in addition to music, you also work in visual art. I know that you did the album artwork for Cycle of Suffering. Did you do the artwork for Dormant Heart or Monolith or any of the other albums too, or just Cycle?
No, just Cycle of Suffering. I've done some artwork in the past, but I'm much better off kind of letting someone else run with that. And I've got like, I've got quite a visual brain, and I used to do a lot of drawing and painting, and I always kind of know what I want. But when I start doing it for myself, I just get into a world of trouble. So I'm better taking a step back and finding the artist that can do it.
Well, is there at all though a similar creative energy that you channel into visual art as you do with music, or do you express a similar entity, or the expression is completely different because it's a different medium?
Yeah, to be honest, and I hate to say this because my mum's an art teacher, or she's retired, but was an art teacher, and I got dragged around a lot of cool art galleries as a kid that I probably didn't appreciate at the time. But I guess so I feel bad saying this, but I've never been like moved by a painting, or like I don't. I love art. I'm really particular about art, and I'm fans of it, but. I never really get like an emotional response. I'll see something like I like that, or I think that looks cool. I'm like a huge fan of like Pushead, who does the Metallica artwork, and or his, like the old Metallica T-shirt designs, or like John Dye Baisley for Baroness, his work. I love it, but I don't necessarily look at something and get hit with like an emotion when you hear like a really crushingly, devastatingly emotional song. I can't. I don't get that same reaction, and I don't have that same input when I'm drawing or painting. So yeah, obviously there'll be pictures of paintings where you can like see that, but I don't react to it in the same way.
Okay. How was the album artwork for Cycle of Suffering done? Was that a painting, or because to have that type of symmetry is not easy?
Oh yeah, no, that's a digital painting. So it was originally, I painted it on numerous flights on my iPad, and then it was just like the face and this whole thing, and then I just like flipped it and mirrored it. I was like, oh yeah, we have something now. So yeah, I can't say that I perfectly mirrored the image.
Fair enough. So before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time today, for such an awesome conversation, and most of all, just on a personal level, thank you for your amazing music that has inspired me and many other metalheads as well. Is there just
Thank you.
Is there just anything else with the release of A Sign of Things to Come that you'd like to promote? You haven't been to North America, I don't think, since the Lamb of God In Flames Hatebreed tour. So, and that was over 10 years ago. So, any chance that that's in the plot?
We'll be back. We did one sort of did one tour after that. We did a tour with Trivium and Devil Driver the year after it, and we did maybe less than 2 weeks, and we got in a really bad van accident in Montreal in Canada. So that one doesn't really count. But yes, we plan on coming back in 2024. We cannot wait, and I'm always like super stoked to hear people like yourself who are like genuine fans of the band. I'm like, oh cool, it's good that we've got fans like that out in the States, considering we haven't been over for a while. Yeah, no, I'm just really hoping that everyone likes the record and spends some time with it and enjoys it as much as we do.
Yeah, and I guarantee that is going to be the case. Somebody who's heard it before, I can speak for that. But thank you so much, everybody. Josh of Sylosis, A Sign of Things to Come. Be sure to pick it up. It is coming out this year via Nuclear Blast, September 8th. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
Day after my birthday. And we will see you next time on Heavy New York.